It's Rhema Breakfast. You're with Andrew and Kat, and we are very pleased to welcome to the show this morning Alfred Ngaro, the leader of the NewZeal party. Alfred, good morning.
Morning, Nikorua, Andrew and Kat, and to all our Radio Rhema listeners this morning.
Great to have you with us. Now, I understand you were the first New Zealand-born Cook Islander in Parliament. You were born to hardworking immigrant parents. You trained as an electrician and in theology, and you've served in various roles during your 2011 to 2020 parliamentary tenure. So let's look at the reasons behind forming NewZeal, because you've been in politics for a number of years, then you took a break. What has seen you come back to politics this time around?
Yeah, well, it's because the impression of God sort of called on my heart. I can honestly say I was reluctant the first time, and I was reluctant the second time because I felt that I'd been there, done that, and I sort of made this vow before God. I don't ever want to come back to this place, And it was only just say 12 weeks ago where I just felt the presence of God say, let it go, and I knew what it was. I needed to let go of that vow, and I repented of that. I asked for forgiveness, Lord, that I'd even said that. And then what happened is that when that went out of me, what God put inside of me is his heart for the love of this nation and its people. And then, so I thought that was hard enough. But then my wife was another mountain to climb, because when I told her, she said, "Are you kidding? We're not going back there." Oh. But she said, God's going to have to speak to me. And sure enough, through the book of Matthew, he said, count the cost, pick up your cross and carry me. And so we both, and then with our children, who again, we've got 4 adoptive children, 2 mokos, they said, "Dad, why do you want to take us back into the place of public scrutiny, judgment, and expectation?" And but in the end, they said, "But if this is the will of God, you've always stood with us, even in days where you didn't agree with some of our decisions. So we love you." So, with the love of my family, with the support of my children, I'm stepping in because I believe that this is something that God has called us to.
Yeah. And I mean, there are a number of parties as well that are vying for attention in this election who, have not been elected before. But I think one of the great advantages for NewZeal is that you are, ultimately voting for somebody who has parliamentary experience, who kind of knows a little bit of how the system works. And tell us about, expand on that idea before too, when you said about how it's a place that you don't necessarily want to go, even though you can tell there's a great benefit for others to walk in those halls of power. What is it that makes it such a difficult environment to operate in?
Well, it's challenging. The environment itself, I think, is because of the expectations and what people have on the place and what they expect of parliamentarians. I mean, the trust and confidence surveys they do every year in New Zealand, as you can imagine, the most untrusted profession. What do you think it is, Andrew?
Yeah.
I have a feeling it might be related to your profession, my friend.
Well, actually, you're both wrong. Actually, it's car salesman. So shame on you guys. No, but then politicians come second, right?
Yeah.
But the truth is that darkness is only the absence of light. And so what do I mean by that? That when you step into there, if you know that there's a calling on your life, if you know the values that you have, then that's what sustains you. And then, we know that there are characters that God has called. So God chooses people like the Daniels, the Josephs, the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Mordecai and Esther who are in the marketplace. I believe that one of the things that as a church we need to continue to do more of is equip more people to step into that space. And we only call it darkness and we call it difficult. Some people call it evil because we don't choose to go into that place. And yet surely the confidence that God has given to us is that there is no dark place that his light cannot shine. And so for me, when I'm in there, that's what I'm there for. I think one of the big challenges, Andrew and Kate, is that sometimes on some of the social issues, the church has been unsure and unclear about how do we speak into that. And so because people say, oh no, you get seen as the moral police, you're trying to judge people and not be tolerant and loving. And you say, no, that's not true, because Jesus walked in truth, but he exercised grace. How do you hold a strong position because you know it to be true and then still exercising grace, because that's what we do. And so at the moment, because we haven't done enough of that, rather than having some clarity, we've now got 50 shades of grey, where all of a sudden people are confused, uncertain about what the future could look like. And so my point of difference, as you said, Andrew, was that there's been no minority party that's ever got into parliament without having a former or current MP. And the reason is people will vote for competence.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And look, you've got to have a lot of respect for people going into politics because you need a certain amount of thick skin, Alfred, to actually deal with what you face. So let's talk about something that you touched on, social issues and the policies that NewZeal wants to bring to address some of these things. So let's talk about NewZeal. Tell us what your party is all about and what differentiates your party from others.
Well, I'm glad you said thick skin and not thick head, Kate. So that's really good. So one of the policies, the first one is family. Our point of difference is that lots of people say, yeah, family. But you see, what I learned in my 9 years and even being a cabinet minister is that there's a thing called the paramountcy clause. In other words, what's the center that you build both policy, legislation, and eventually the practice of any ministry is that you have to have that paramountcy clause that's significant. Family are not the paramountcy clause in many situations. So people then transfer that with the child. Let's take that as an example. Everyone says, yep, that's great. But what happens if you follow that line? Where are parents and families? They're surrogating roles of support to the child, but no different to health, no different to education. So then what happens is that what we're now starting to see is non-consented behavior, right, and opportunities without actually asking the consent of the parents. Now what we're doing is this is where the breakdown of the family begins to happen. So it's one thing to say family, but it's another thing about knowing how to make sure you implement the heart of the family at the heart of policy. So therefore, if you want to talk to the child, guess what? You got to talk to the family. If you want to do anything with the child, you've got to talk to the family and engage with them. Now, that may be small, but I can tell you this now, having been, if we call it the belly of that beast, it's significant and it's important. It's the reasons why whānau order was there as well. Now, these are things that are important. So it's family, it's finance, for instance. Financial responsibility is more about attitude and behavior than it is about finances. Itself is about money. And I learned that being at Bill English's office and understanding that. But how do we unlock innovation? That's important. When we use the word recession, everyone thinks about depression. Let's use the word reset. In other words, let's innovate that Kiwi DNA of pioneers, risk takers, because that's who we are. So that's what we're thriving. That's what we're putting forward as well. And we talk about farming, for instance. When we talk about food, the whole cost of living that you mentioned, well, we call that food inflation. Well, the reality is that if you tax the farmers, you're actually taxing the family.
I thought I'd deal with maybe the toughest question that I think many people might be thinking about as well, because it's been great to hear from you today, and I'm sure a lot of people are inspired by your vision and what is motivating you and even resonating with those things. But there is an awkward reality that I guess we kind of have to deal with, that many a great candidate, a great man of God even, has stood for the right things and entered the political arena and come away bruised, battered, unsuccessful. It's a difficult thing to get yourself elected in, and yet you've put yourself in that space again. So, talk to us about, I guess, how you're addressing that challenge. I mean, just getting voted in the first place has been a hurdle where many a Christian party or even a Christian-aligned party has fallen over in the past. What makes you different?
Yeah, so think it's a great question. It's the most common question I get asked all the time. So we are a political party, but obviously unashamedly Christian, and who we are. The elephant in the room is not so much about the size, because people say, "Oh, you're too small," and you're too late. But the true elephant in the room is the spirit of unbelief, because the reality is that people will say they'll vote for the lesser of two evils. Well, we don't like those guys. We used to like them. We're not so sure. So we'll just choose the lesser between two evils. In other words, that's voting out of fear rather than voting out of hope. And I want to encourage people to vote out of hope. So let's deal with size, for instance. MMP was made for big and small parties. We have lived for 3 years out of one party rule. And I can tell you, you can see it in the polls. We know why we voted out in 1994. So small minor parties hold bigger parties to account. They often call them the kingmaker because they're the point of difference of getting across the line. So that's what a minority party can do. As far as time is concerned, and they say in politics that one day is a long time. You can start the day as a rooster crowing on the fence post, telling the world about how good you are. You can end the day as a feather duster, so it can move so quickly. You can make a comment at a press conference in one moment, and then also it can change the trajectory of where you go. So the point is not about size, it's not about time, it's about hope. And what NewZeal stands for is that let's vote out of hope and then ask the question, what does hope look like? Well, for me, hope looks like voting for, first of all, political leadership that has a set of values that people can resonate with. They say, yep. And then my proven track record, you can look that up. I've always stood for the things that I believe are the same values as many conservative people have as well. The second thing is what you call the ability to be able to then go into that situation, having done a period of time, knowing how the system works, means that you're going to get someone that's got the competence to do the job. So people need to know two things when they're voting. Can they trust you, and do they have the confidence that you can do the job? And I just believe that's what I'm putting myself out there. And look, there's a precedent. Lastly, in 2002, Peter Dunn was a one-person party. Within a short period of time, almost the same as what we have now, 29 days, is that he went out and he spoke. People resonated with what he had to say. Within that short period, he went from a one-man party to a 10-man party in 2002. So there's a precedent. It is possible. It can happen when people vote out of hope.
Well, Alfred, you make an interesting case there. So let's talk about the issues facing New Zealanders that are the most urgent to you and the NewZeal party. What do you believe these are?
Well, the cost of living is the number one thing that people are always talking about. Why? Because the reality is that people are hurting at the moment. Families are struggling to actually get enough food in the supermarkets, in the dairies. People are saying the same thing too. Everyone's coming in, but the shopping bags are now one bag or half a bag than what it used to be, 2 or 3. And that's resonating right across. With NewZeal, we really believe it's really important. We need to not talk about a recession, but we need to talk about how we can reset that course in ensuring. So we believe in fiscal responsibility, focusing on the things that are really important. The second one is around law and order. I know people are really concerned because are they safe enough? Look, it's only 5 days ago, 6 doors up from our house over in Te Awatere Peninsula, there was a woman that was murdered. So it's just as real for us as it is for anyone in our community. So we believe in NewZeal. The fact is that, choices have consequences. Even gangs have rules and laws. So if you break the rules, right, you've got to pay the consequence. So that's really clear. That's black and white. But at the same time, too, what we don't do well enough, and I've known because I've been in the system, rehabilitation has to follow reintegration. And so we have the highest rate of recidivism, in other words, repeat offending. So what we need to do is that how do we help those who find themselves inside the system to make sure they can reintegrate and actually live lives that they can be proud of for them and their family? How do we make sure that we also focus on what are the causations? And if we create more opportunities in education and health so that we can support families to be healthy, bring that family together, that family unit, then we believe that we can address some of the issues, some of the key issues around law and order. The last thing is at the moment, what's being used as a political football is co-governance. Mm-hmm. We don't want to talk about co-governance because it's been used as a way, as a megaphone to create a division and pain. We want to talk about kawanata. You talked about actually just in one of the ads about kawanata. Kawanata means covenant. It came from a word that was introduced by Henry Williams. And when you go up north, Māori kaumatas will say te kawanata o te tiriti o Waitangi, a covenant relationship. And so we want to talk about covenant because that's what you will unite us. Mm. It's more than just about 3 Ps of partnership, protection, and participation. So for us, we've got the courage to be able to have those courageous conversations, create a safe place so all New Zealanders can ask questions, whether they understand or don't understand, whether they agree or don't agree. That's what we believe is really important. Those are some of the pressing issues for our nation.
Brilliant. Well, look, Alfred, I really appreciate you taking the time to expand upon those for us. I'm going to, in the last minute that we have, give you the chance to answer the question that I've asked to every political leader who's come in. Why should a Christian vote for you?
Well, and it's not just a Christian. I believe that's all conservative people, is because the fact is that, I've stood on the things that I believed in my faith, both me and my family. I know that what this nation is crying out for is for truth and justice and righteousness. But can I just remind people that the footprint of faith is deep and wide in this land? In other words, the impression that God has left, and let people not say that this is not a Christian nation. There are so many things that we talk about that we know that are really important. And if we want to see this nation change, we pray for godly leadership. We pray for righteousness and justice in our parties. Well, now it's standing looking at you right now. NewZeal party is that party.
Well, Alfred Ngaro, thank you so much for taking the time to share your thoughts with us. And look, all the best with the election. Hope to talk to you again sometime very soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kat, and thank you, Andrew. Ka kite anō.